Kaizer Chiefs suffered their first defeat of the season, and it was a horrible one. 3-1 to Sekhukhune United. But let's look at what Kaizer Chiefs did in this game, what they did very right, and how this forced Eric Tinkler to make a sub early on in the second half, and how Kaizer Chiefs ended up just giving the game away. Let's start with how Kaizer Chiefs were looking to attack, and specifically the role of Gaston Sereno. And the first thing that you see here is that Glody Lilebo is staying wide. As always, we've explained this before. He stays wide so that he can drag a defender with him, and if that happens, then that will create the space between the defensive lines, and they do not want that to happen. So if you look here, Sereno then moves across because he knows that there will be space that is created since Lilebo is stretching the field. But what Sekhukhune then did, they made sure that there was always someone with him, and that was the captain Umkhize, who was always man marking Usireno, making sure that he's with him, to a point that he would even tuck in and be part of a back five just to make sure that he keeps Usireno under pressure. So you would see here once again Sereno tries to drop, but Mkhize is there. But then if you look closely, you will see that Lilebo holds his width, and in him holding his width, and with Silva staying relatively central, he also makes the defender think twice, and the defender I'm talking about is Tokolo with the hair. He's looking and is thinking, should I go help Puletlapa on the left, or should I stay with Silva? And that leaves that space for Kaizer Chiefs to then exploit and try to play the ball into that space, with Sereno turning and attacking it. And they did not just do this on the left-hand side, they also did it on the right-hand side. This, by the way, explains why you did not see Silva just staying in the box, because you see that him dropping creates space behind the defenders. Tokolo is moving with him, and then you have Usireno again on the right half space being man-marked. But by virtue of Silva dropping and the defender following him, that means now there's space behind defenders that they can now exploit. And when they try to do this on the right, you will see that Upright Ndlovu, was not really trying to be dragged out of position by Silva. So he stayed on his line, which just shows the difference between the two players, which is Utokolo and Ndlovu. And we'll talk about that later on in the video. So once again, Sereno tightly man-marked, but then as a smart player that he is, he makes those darting runs, and then he changes direction, and then he finds himself in behind. You see the same situation. Sereno is on the right half space, Lilebo is wide, Tokolo is dragged by Da Silva, and once again the space that's created, and now Chiefs can play the ball in that space and try to cross the ball. And this happens over and over again. If it's not Sereno dragging Tokolo, it's someone else. Now, if we look at this for the goal, you see that Sereno and Lilebo had rotated, but their roles are still the same in terms of what the player is expected to do. You have Sereno staying wide on the line, you have Lilebo on the half space, and you have Tokolo being dragged with Lilebo. And as that happens, now the space that is in behind, Sereno can now play the ball into that space, and then the ball is crossed, and then Kaizer Chiefs score the goal. So this agenda that Kaizer Chiefs had no plan, they were just doing things, they actually had a plan. I just showed you a pattern. It's not a thing that happened once, it's a thing that happened over and over and over and over again. And I showed you clips so that there is evidence that there was actually a plan, an approach, and it did work, which is exactly why at halftime the coach of Sekhukhune took off Tokolo, because he saw that he was getting dragged out of position a lot, and then in his absence they scored the 2 goals, and then the game was basically buried. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, do make sure to subscribe. So let's look at the other thing, why this did not work on the left hand side. Well, it's simple. You see that Silva is leaning across again, but look at who's playing the Sereno role, right? Because Sereno is playing as a 10 on that right hand side. They are playing 2 10s, but the second 10 is not really a 10, but it's left back Umako. inverting, becoming a 10 in that position. And when the ball was played in these areas, you will see that Brighton Love once again is dragged across, although he's maintaining his distance. But when the ball is played in these areas, on the right back Matsimbi is busy focusing on Pulemodi. So again, there's space. So the general idea is the same. There's space and then the gap between the center back and the full back. And then when the ball is played, unfortunately in this case, for Marco, he just couldn't compete aerially. And the other problem that made Chiefs not look as deadly is because Love was not bombing forward enough. He's a box-to-box midfielder. You expect him to be quick in doing that. I was watching the game yesterday. I'm like, he should be doing this much faster, but it just wasn't. And you see opportunities like this where the ball is being played, and instead of him attacking that space, he doesn't do that. Here, Sereno is given the ball, he turns, and then is now attacking space. Now, he couldn't have passed Undlovu, but this was going to help if Undlovu was running across to Sereno, because now Chiefs would be able to counter press and win the ball earlier on. But what ends up happening is Sekukune end up launching a counter, which is something that they wanted to wanted to avoid. And I know that Undlovu had an okay game. He didn't play bad. It's just that as a player who is very good going forward, if it's the decision by the coaching staff, then it's something that they should look at fixing, because he has goals in him. Mteto can go forward and is good for counter pressing, but naturally he's not that box to box midfielder. He can be good with counter pressing and all of that stuff, but why not make Undlovu do those things while he's bombing forward? So that's just interesting. By the way, if you're wondering why my voice is low, I'm recording this video at 1 minute past 1 at night. So excuse me for the voice being low. I know the volume is still high enough. So another thing that you will see is that Frosler did not use the half space properly. The spelling is not even correct. So once again, as it happens when Monyane is there, Chiefs would have Monyane starting in half space and Lelepo staying wide. And if the ball is played there, then Munyane would get the ball and run in that space. But Frosler in this case failed to trap the ball. But in other cases, he did get it right and he made those runs in the half space. But when they got in this area, Chiefs players, they would decide to pass instead of shooting. Or if they took a shot, it was tame. And another thing, there were not enough crosses for a team that was playing with a striker so tall as Flavio Silva. Why not make more crosses into the box? I saw the thing with Frosler. One of his first crosses, I think his first cross in the second half was after Flavio Silva had been taken off. I'm like, dude, you had a tall striker. You didn't play crosses. I know there was one where he was trying to cushion the ball for the person behind him, but it ended up just hitting him, and then fans started booing, which is crazy business. But Asekolap, where we are is they did not utilize crosses, which brings us to defense, because this is very, very crucial. From the beginning of the game, Sekukune was targeting fullbacks. Goal kick, kick off, they kick the ball to the left to Marco. 49 seconds into the game, they kick the ball to Marco. And then 7 minutes, this is again them attacking down the right hand side, Kafrosla. And then you see it again on the second minute. This was before they even scored a goal. So for the first goal, it was a drop ball from a free kick, from a set piece that they said umthetho committed on Mncube. So what happens is then they get a drop ball. Look at that Lapas thinking. He's like, one thing is in his mind: play that ball across, target to Marco. Marco here. McCarthy has this under control. If it doesn't have it under control, your job is to cover him, not to try and help him, because for one, aerially, you're not that great because you are short, mate. So he goes in, and in him going in, he's completely left the person that is supposed to be marking. Now, when the ball is headed, it then goes behind and then they score. And then it was 1-0, just like that. if we look at how Kaizer Chiefs were also trying to press and what triggered them, you see that you'll have those two, Silva and Sereno, leading the press. But when Munari left the center of the pitch to try and get the ball, then you have Mtetwa tracking him and making sure he doesn't get the ball. And then on the right, Unlov would also stay tight on Mkhize. And if Umncube dropped into those positions, he would also be tight on him. But the other important thing here is that what you are seeing now is Pule Modi and Silva applying pressure to Sekhukhune defense, because Kaizer Chiefs play high line. What's the point of playing high line if you're not going to apply pressure? I will come back to that later on, because there are a lot of people who are criticizing Mteto for pressing, but Chiefs were playing high line, but they were not pressing. You see, that makes no sense, because if you're not pressing while you're in a high line, you are giving the person, a defender who has the ball at that time, enough time to get the ball, look for a pass, and then just play it behind the defenders. So someone has to press. And you will see why I bring that up, because here in this case, they do a good job. They press. This is another thing. Silva and Modi, or Silva and Lilebo, would press and force the ball back. And once the ball is forced back, now the touch here is heavy. And this is what we call a pressing trigger. Basically, a pressing trigger is, we'll press in that shape, just make sure we push you like this, like that. But the moment there's a heavy touch, we are triggered to press. The moment the ball is played backwards, we are triggered to press. Or maybe when the ball is played to a certain player, we are triggered to press. So in this case, clearly this is a pressing trigger because there's a heavy touch. So Mtetwa sees that, and Usirino has not run enough across, and Nundlovu is there for cover. So Ox goes in, he tries to press. Now, the goal. So you see the goalkeeper, Unzabata here, plays the ball long. Frosler deals with it, fine. And then as the ball goes forward, Silva, being tired, he does not go to press. Because look at where Chiefs players are, as we are going to see in a second. They have pushed up to this position, yet there was no one pressing, which means one way or the other, the defender was going to play that forward pass. So people can blame Umthetho, but let's look at the positioning of Riff Rosler. Look at the other three defenders. They're at least 2 meters in front of him. Yena, he's staying behind. The fact that he's in this position after the ball is kicked tells you that he was already playing Ukropla on. And when the ball is played long to Ukropla, people will blame Miguel, but Miguel had pushed up with his line, but Ufrosla is behind. Now, the ball is played long, and what happens? The ball is won, and we know what happened after that. Ukropla just headed the ball, and then there was nothing that Frosler could do from that point. He tried to get across, but then he wasn't strong enough, and then they ended up scoring. Which brings us to the third goal, which would be frustrating for the coach. Once again, Frosler wins the ball, plays it to Miguel. Miguel, with the skills that he has, he can turn around and attack down the line. He decides to play the ball back to pressure behind Umthetwa, and then when the ball is won here, Miguel tries to go and close the player down, but it just gets skinned beautifully, and then again the ball just bounces around the 18 area. And what a beautiful finish this by Bradley Robler. So the score is 3-1 at this point. The question remains, if you watched the game and you saw the approach from both teams, which part would make you say the coach is clueless? It's just a question that I have, because I feel like, as it happens with Pirates fans earlier on in the season, and I told them that Owadu seemed to have a plan. It's just that he changed a lot of players, and obviously since they're adapting, that was going to be problematic. People were like, no, he's a plumber. He's won them the MTN8. He's no longer a plumber now. I think fans sometimes on their heads, they get too emotional and they don't watch the game based on facts but feelings. I'm just saying, if you enjoyed the video, do make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Check out this video that YouTube thinks you might like. I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.